This is the first comedy movie by top Thai superstar James since he got married. As soon as the movie starts, he has to go all over the city to find a young woman to marry. Because if he can't find a wife immediately, he's going to lose his life. But the standards are a bit strict. Basically, anyone with a country accent is a no-go. And anyone who has been seen by government officials before won't work either. After thinking it over, he set his sights on a theater troupe that just arrived in town. That's because the dancers there aren't just pretty. They also speak fluent standard Thai. This fits perfectly with the massive lie his stepfather just told for him. It turns out that half an hour ago, 2 bodies showed up in the city in a really weird condition, looking like they were attacked by some powerful dark magic. Recently, similar murders have been happening a lot in the city. The Minister of National Security took it very seriously and immediately called a meeting with officials to discuss beefing up their defenses. After everyone nominated themselves, the minister chose a Thirit, who is fluent in foreign languages and great at communicating. But before the ink could even dry on the signature, 3 gunshots rang out from the city tower. The king's wife had suddenly died from a severe illness. According to the laws from years past, the eldest son of every official, if he's unmarried, has to shave his head and become a monk to pray for the royal family for 15 days. Seeing his son's chance for a promotion slipping away, the stepfather lied and said he had gotten married 3 months ago. However, this is a crime of deceiving the king. To save his life, Ethirit has to find someone to marry this very day. That explains the scene at the beginning of the movie. Just as Ethirit was rushing to the theater troupe, he accidentally bumped into a tiny guy. The ledger flew into the air and fell back down. Ethirit lost his balance and fell on top of the guy. And his lips smashed right into the other person's lips. Because he was in a rush, he angrily touched his bleeding lip, called it bad luck and turned to leave. He didn't realize the other person had taken a hard hit too. The 2 of them got into a heated argument. It was only then that Ethirit realized the person in front of him was actually a girl. But he didn't think much of it and just pulled out his purse to pay for damages. When the girl wouldn't take it, he didn't push it and turned to head toward the theater troupe. They say money makes things easy. Ethirit quickly found someone who fit the bill. But when he brought her home, he realized the girl knew nothing about her mission, so he had to explain everything all over again. Seeing his lifeline slipping away, Ethirit hurriedly spoke up to keep her, reassuring her that as long as they weren't caught, nothing would happen. It took a lot of effort to finally convince Faka. Just as they finished rehearsing their lines, Ethirit prepared to take her to meet his father, but she suddenly ran away. It turns out she wasn't just a dancer in the troupe. She also moonlighted at an entertainment venue serving wealthy men. She knew the guest who arrived that day and realized her father's sworn enemy had come to the house to catch them out, so she panicked and urged Faka to leave immediately. But unfortunately, she moved too clumsily and crashed into some furniture. The noise immediately caught the enemy's attention. Ethirit had to lie and say his wife was still putting on makeup. Then he quickly ran out to the yard, planning to find a maid to stand in for her. As luck would have it, Duong had just arrived at his mansion to make a delivery. Seeing this savior fall from the sky, Ethirit decided to seize the opportunity immediately. But to avoid making the same mistake as before, he had to ask her clearly first. As expected, he got a slap in the face for his trouble, fighting back the pain. He tried to explain the reason. Duong, naturally, had no intention of entertaining this man's ridiculous request and refused. But unable to withstand Ethirit's special tactics, and thinking of her seriously ill father at home with no money for medicine, Duong finally reluctantly agreed. So Ethirit immediately dragged her off for a makeover. The stylist was none other than Faka, who was, after all, experienced in the entertainment world. Faka skillfully scrubbed Duong from head to toe, then applied a homemade fragrance all over her body. She didn't even miss the spaces between Duong's teeth. Watching the pitch-black bathwater drain away, Ethirit couldn't help but wonder if Duong hadn't bathed in 6 months. He didn't dare hope for much from this imposter, but the moment Duong stepped out, he couldn't help but stare in awe. He never expected that after washing off the grime, the girl would look so elegant and beautiful. But a second later, Duong's country accent snapped him back to reality. Sure enough, a wild chicken can never become a phoenix. She hadn't walked 2 steps before Duong revealed her true colors. But at this point, Ethirit had no choice but to wing it, having her copy Faka's walk and attitude. The problem was, Duong couldn't do any of it well. Luckily, Faka taught her a secret weapon. If she couldn't answer a question, she should just cast a flirtatious glance. Before they went out, Ethirit even taught Duong the basics of bowing, but in the very next second, she almost ruined everything. Fortunately, Duong was quick-witted enough to use the ultimate move, and they luckily passed the test. Later, she played a tune on the eru to show off her talent. But her dignified image only lasted until she received the meeting gift. She immediately broke character and blurted out a sentence in her local dialect. Although she tried to cover it up, the stepfather's enemy had already started to get suspicious. The longer they stayed, the easier it would be to get caught. So Duong nudged the servant girl holding the water, pretending to get her clothes wet so she could go back to her room to change. But the old man had come specifically to catch them out, so he wasn't going to leave that easily. He sneaked up outside their room to spy on them. At that moment, Duong was getting ready to return the gift. Spotting the enemy, she immediately hugged Etheret and whispered in his ear that the old man had come back. Etheret hatched a plan. He took Duong into the room and loudly insisted on keeping a secret, which made the old man barge right in through the curtain. This time, the old man couldn't explain his way out of it. Duong put on an Oscar-worthy performance, crying and explaining that she used coconut shells to compensate for a congenital defect. Etheret pretended to be furious, criticizing the old man for his rude behavior. The father, who was in on the plan, added fuel to the fire, saying that if this were reported to the higher-ups, it would definitely be a capital offense. Duong pretended not to forgive him and returned the gift, forcing the old man to back off and not dare spy on them again. The three of them scored a big victory and raised a glass to celebrate that evening. Duong happily thought her mission was over. She was about to say goodbye when she overheard a conversation that terrified her. Since they had dispelled the enemy's suspicions, the stepfather felt that Duong, this potential liability, should be eliminated. After all, only the dead can keep a secret forever. The scene shifts. Originally, he found a fake wife to save his life and avoid trouble. But as it turned out, he was accidentally fed a powerful aphrodisiac herb. In the middle of the night, acting like he was possessed, he chased after Duong, demanding to fulfill his marital duties. Now, the girl usually has explosive fighting skills. She can take on 3 guys at once. But facing an Etheret who had lost his mind, she had no strength to resist. She could only struggle to escape and hide in the bushes. But the man appeared right behind her like a ghost, scaring her half to death. On reflex, she used her head. Luckily, she found a large water jar to hide in, but his keen nose quickly sniffed her out. She thought he definitely wouldn't be able to get into such a tight space. But unexpectedly, the man quietly made a hole in the jar. Unable to take it anymore, Duong threw a punch that left him dazed, then quickly climbed out. She was just about to run hide somewhere else when the man anticipated her move and blocked her path. This time Duong really had no way out. Just as she was helplessly preparing to accept her fate, Etheret suddenly woke up from his sleepwalking. Realizing his clothes were a mess, he immediately panicked and could only blame everything on Duong. Turns out a few hours ago, Duong had finished her mission of pretending to be a wife, and was about to leave when she accidentally overheard the stepfather's plan to eliminate her. She panicked and ran blindly, jumping down from the 2nd floor trying to escape, but she was caught by someone waiting at the cowshed. Seeing something that looked like a dagger in the man's hand, Duong was desperate but had no escape, so she decided to face it. Unexpectedly, what looked like a dagger was actually full of copper coins. It turns out the stepfather was worried his son's fake marriage would be exposed, so he planned to secretly send Duong away quickly, and even gave her a generous bonus. Once reassured, Duong called all her companions to go with Etheret to the city gate. Just as they were planning to sneak out of the city under the man's cover, they suddenly saw 2 officials being escorted past. Etheret glanced over and recognized them as acquaintances. Without thinking too much, he just wanted to get Duong out of the city. Before parting ways, he once again sincerely thanked Duong for her help. Unexpectedly, he was suddenly hugged tight by her. Thinking the girl couldn't bear to leave him, he immediately started acting deep and emotional. But the next second, Duong reminded him someone was coming. Realizing the king was leading the captain of the security team on patrol, with nowhere to hide, Etheret had to pull Duong out to present themselves. Knowing they were catching those avoiding becoming monks, Etheret's heart skipped a beat, because he was also planning to get his fake wife out of the city. Hearing that getting caught meant facing such severe punishment, Etheret momentarily didn't know how to explain why he and Duong were out there in the middle of the night. Just as his brain froze, Duong happened to spot some aphrodisiac herbs on the ground, quickly picked one up, stuffed it in her mouth and loudly said, "We were out looking for fresh herbs," luckily dodging a bullet. The two went home to continue discussing how to leave. But Duong's face had been seen by the king. If she disappeared, it would definitely raise suspicions. And once the lie was exposed, they would surely face a bad ending. This time, Duong absolutely couldn't leave anymore. While she was thinking of how to refuse, Duong suddenly saw a jar of precious ginseng wine behind the man and realized it was the rare medicine needed to cure her father. So she gritted her teeth and decided to trade her body for it. She carefully carved words onto the jar, then took a shower and got into bed. Seeing the girl's attitude of treating death as light as a feather, Etheret realized she had misunderstood his intentions. He hurriedly explained he just wanted her to cooperate and put on a show for everyone. Then he gallantly gave the big bed to Duong, while he slept on the couch. But when he fell asleep, he overlooked the power of that herb, which caused the chaotic scene from earlier. The next day, Duong saw off her companions and officially played the role of Etheret's well-mannered wife, But before she could even open her mouth, she almost blew her cover. The more she did, the more mistakes she made, so she decided to keep her mouth shut and use a fake smile to cope. But going on like this wasn't a solution. Etheret decided to personally teach her the etiquette of a noble lady. Seeing her walking clumsily, he couldn't help but flick her ear to discipline her. Unexpectedly, Duong not only didn't listen but also performed a stunt, somersaulting back to her spot. Seeing Etheret about to flick her ear again, she immediately threw a punch to warn him. Trying to sniff back the nosebleed that was slowly trickling down, Etheret helplessly ordered Duong to walk again. This time, the girl walked moving her arm and leg on the same side, and even tripped over herself on the way back. The more he taught, the angrier he got, filled with helplessness inside. Duong had absolutely no self-awareness of a lady. Even just going out for a stroll caused chaos on the whole street. Actually, this couldn't be entirely blamed on Duong, because it was all intentionally set up by the enemy to intimidate the two of them. But he underestimated Duong's fighting skills. With just 2 moves, she took care of the thugs he sent. And Duong didn't come away empty-handed either. While tied up, she accidentally met an enthusiastic younger girl. Ving was the first friend she made here. At this moment, Duong was happy, unaware that Ving was actually someone intentionally approaching her, with a mysterious man above her. Very quickly, the news that Duong took down 2 robbers on the street reached Etheret's ears. This was too different from the quiet, introverted image he had described about his wife, so it made many colleagues mock him. Etheret angrily went home to settle the score with Duong. But before he could open his mouth, he got a massive slap from her out of reflex. Duong felt guilty and quickly pretended to be obedient. But this trick didn't work at all on the furious Etheret. The next day, she put on makeup carefully and decided to start learning seriously. This obedient look successfully fooled the man, but this perfect lady image didn't last 3 seconds. By mealtime, her true colors showed. Duong was so spicy she drank the finger bowl water. Etheret tirelessly taught her table manners and finally got her to eat slowly. But the next second, Duong used her bare hands to knead dough. When Etheret used a stick to correct her sitting posture, his nose was brutally attacked again. Duong barely finished the morning training when she realized Etheret left his documents at home, so she had to ride a water buffalo to bring them to him. Duong just handed him the documents, but Etheret, afraid his colleagues would see, hurriedly chased her away. No good deed goes unpunished. Although Duong was totally dissatisfied inside, she still listened and rode the water buffalo back. As a result, she accidentally almost crashed into the prince, who was late for a meeting. It was the first time in his life he saw someone riding a buffalo for a stroll in the palace. The prince felt it was inappropriate, so naturally, he shouted and ordered Duong to take her vehicle away immediately. Unexpectedly, this action completely angered the girl, so she went straight into bully mode. As a result, the prince drew several black streaks on her face. Seeing the 5 black streaks on her face, Duong was almost scared to death. Then she heard the prince criticize her for improper behavior, saying she was nothing like the lady Etheret had described. Constant provocation made Duong lose her cool, and she bragged that she not only knew how to sing and dance but her English level was also top tier. However, she instantly regretted it, but it was too late. Because this Sunday there would be a requiem ceremony for the queen, and just then, a representative of an arms dealer had just arrived. So the prince hoped Duong could act as an interpreter. Hearing this, Etheret froze. Duong barely knew how to read, how could she speak English? This time, not only would he fail to get a promotion and get rich, but he might also lose his life. So after returning home, he vented his anger on Duong. But Duong, still with the painted face she hadn't wiped clean, proudly said she made him look good today. Etheret was so angry he laughed and didn't argue anymore. The urgent matter now was how to do damage control on that lie. Teaching Duong etiquette before was as hard as climbing to the sky. Wouldn't teaching English be even harder? However, Duong proudly said her mind was sharp, and she could easily handle it with just a few crash courses. But while the ideal was full, the reality was bony. Just learning a few basic phrases, Duong managed to jumble everything up. Etheret angrily intended to warn her, but as a result, he almost ate a punch. Completely speechless, he could only continue to patiently teach her. However, a bad student is still a bad student. After a whole day, Duong only remembered 2 sentences. Although the crash course in foreign languages was useless, etiquette still had to be strengthened. Etheret spared no effort teaching Duong how to make flower garlands. But before she could even start, the girl stabbed her own hand. Etheret was helpless, but before he could scold her, he was called away by a guest who suddenly visited. Taking advantage of the time the man wasn't scolding her, Duong hurriedly showed off her skills, threading the flowers directly. When she finished the simple garland and intended to turn it in, she discovered Etheret was hosting a female guest. The other person was not only beautiful but also spoke very elegantly. One look and you knew she was a standard noble lady. However, the atmosphere between the two of them was a bit strange. Standing in the corner, Duong intended to silently observe for a moment, but unluckily, She was caught red-handed by that girl, so she had to obediently step forward and use a smile to hide her awkwardness. Isan looked beautiful and acted like nothing was wrong on the outside, but inside she had already cursed Duong 1,000 times. It turns out she had been childhood sweethearts with Etheret since they were small. She originally thought that when they grew up, the two of them would definitely become a couple, but who knew she would be beaten to it by the woman in front of her. This moment, Duong didn't know anything and intended to save face for Etheret, but discovered the man moved away from her like he was avoiding the plague. Isan intentionally invited Duong to the garden to admire the flowers, saying every flower and branch here was planted by the two of them personally. Seeing Duong didn't understand the meaning in her words, she picked 2 flowers and talked about their meanings, insinuating that Duong was like a wildflower that could be thrown away at any time. But unfortunately, the innocent Duong wasn't on the same wavelength as her at all, so finally, she had to leave their house in sadness. Although Duong is a bit slow when it comes to romance, the lingering look on Etheret's face when parting still made her realize something was unusual. However, the next second, the gossip from the servants helped her answer her questions. It turns out if not for her appearance, Isan and Etheret would be the perfect couple in others' eyes. Only then did Duong realize the truth. She took out the scented pouch Etheret dropped earlier and found it was embroidered with the very rose branch Isan just gave. She didn't want to ruin someone else's relationship, so she asked why he didn't tell Isan about their fake marriage. But Etheret asked her not to speak of this. That evening, Duong carefully thought about the 2 flowers Isan introduced, and finally understood that girl actually dared to mock her. Momentarily angry, she sat up and cursed loudly, even making enough noise to wake Etheret sleeping on the sofa. Since she couldn't curse the person directly, she turned to curse the person she loved to vent her anger. Maybe because he was cursed too much last night. The next day, while Duong was learning the tea ceremony, Etheret intentionally threw a stick that looked like a venomous snake. It scared Duong so much she immediately somersaulted 3 yards away and grabbed a small knife nearby to stab the snake, but looking closely, she realized it was a stick and she had been tricked. Duong opened her mouth intending to scold Etheret, but as a result, she got lectured by him instead. Not convinced, Duong sat down again to show off her talent, but her clumsy acting skills were still despised. Hearing the man dare to use Isan as an example, Duong's competitive spirit immediately rose, so she sought out Faka, who had given her a makeover before, hoping she could pass on some exclusive secret manuals. Unexpectedly, Faka told her to challenge a monk who had just returned to secular life. However, after she tried hard to perform a talent, she directly caused the other person to completely abandon the worldly life, determined to put on the cassock and take refuge in Buddhism again. Compared to wasting time on fields she wasn't good at, Faka advised her to study English hard instead. Returning home, Duong discovered Etheret was still busy with work, so she proactively massaged his sore shoulders for him. After that, she sought out Etheret's stepfather to understand the situation. Knowing he had to lie and fake a marriage with her because he wanted to buy weapons to protect the country, she determined to lend him a hand. Very quickly, the day of the requiem ceremony arrived. Etheret prepared words to deal with the prince, lying that Duong was in pain and couldn't attend the event today. But before he finished speaking, the girl appeared with a dazzling smile. Slapped in the face right there before he could think of how to cope, Duong played the role of a quiet, gentle lady in front of everyone. This time her acting unexpectedly conquered everyone, also making Etheret temporarily relieved. Finishing the mission, Duong decided to withdraw early, but on the way, she met a foreigner being troubled by a water buffalo. After saving the man, she tried to use English to communicate with him, but only a buffalo could understand her words. Realizing this man came to attend the banquet today, she had to turn back to lead the way for him. Unexpectedly, this action helped Etheret a lot. The other person was the arms dealer here to discuss business. Although she didn't understand what the man was saying, luckily Faka had taught her a few bluffing sentences, so she survived the ordeal and maintained her image. This time she successfully received praise from Etheret. To avoid mistakes, Duong took the chance while the enemy hadn't caused trouble yet to hurry and leave, but she accidentally caught someone on the second floor eavesdropping on the arms dealer's conversation. So she picked up a stone on the ground and threw it at them. Seeing that person jump down from the second floor to run away, she immediately legged it after them. Unexpectedly, that fleeing figure in black was her only friend. Duong originally wanted to be kind and help catch the suspect eavesdropping on the arms deal, but who knew halfway through the chase, she was knocked unconscious by a stick from the other person. Failing to catch the suspect, she became the sinner who interrupted the negotiation, and successfully brought trouble upon her fake husband Etheret. Because they couldn't find any evidence proving the existence of the person in black, the prince reasonably suspected all of this was intentionally set up by the two of them. Duong was so angry she wanted to throw a punch at the prince's face. However, this was just her imagination. After all, the image she was playing was a noble lady, so she had to wait until she got home to vent a belly full of anger on Etheret. But what surprised her was that Etherit absolutely believed her words, and told her the person in black was likely a pirate from recently. But since they were now suspected by the prince, they needed to be more careful and discreet. After some comforting from Etherit, the impulsive Duong temporarily calmed down. Unexpectedly, the man was sharp enough to notice a wound on her back. Since the two of them were currently in a fake marriage out of respect, Etherit applied medicine to Duong through a layer of a handkerchief. This action made Duong feel very warm inside, and she immediately became curious about why he and Isan broke up. After hearing from the servants, Duong found out the two actually met through matchmaking. With their family backgrounds, their marriage should have been a match made in heaven, especially since Etherit fell in love at first sight. But he couldn't stand Isan's mother, who was a gold digger. After latching onto Etherit's family, she set her sights on the king's son, so she bluntly told Etherit to break up with her daughter. Their relationship was forced to end from the man's side right then. Knowing the whole story, Duong started to feel a bit of sympathy for Etherit. After all, in this relationship, the most innocent person was him. So the next day, she went to the street planning to pick out fabric to make him a new outfit. As luck would have it, she ran into Isan, the one who had mocked her before. This time, she didn't just innocently smile and let it slide anymore. She used sharp words to clap back, successfully making Isan leave in anger. Her mood improved greatly, and when she got back, she dragged Etherit along to the temple to make merit. Who would have thought enemies cross paths? She bumped into the prince and Isan. Knowing those two were dating now, Duong hurriedly linked arms affectionately to boost the spirits of the downcast man beside her. She even copied her and used flowers to mock Isan. Seeing that Etherit was still lingering and couldn't forget the other woman, Duong had to use her status as his wife to speak up and remind him. After some reasonable persuasion, she finally made Etherit make up his mind to let go. Since he chose to move on, the scented pouch Isan gave him, which she had picked up earlier, didn't need to be returned either, so Duong just tossed it into the bushes. Unexpectedly, this careless action caused her upright husband to be labeled a traitor. Etherit's enemy, Sawa, accidentally picked up the scented pouch Duong threw away. Immediately, an evil plan formed in his head. He bailed out the thug who had robbed Duong earlier from jail, and gave him the mission to steal weapon trade secrets. Waiting until that guy successfully stole the documents, he used the scented pouch as a reward, then suddenly used a dagger to eliminate him. Not long after, the foreign arms dealer discovered his house was burglarized and reported the crime. The captain of the security team immediately found the body of the document thief out in the field, and in his hand, he was clutching the scented pouch with Etherit's name on it. Although the prince separates public and private matters and couldn't bear to see his best friend go to jail, in the face of ironclad evidence, he had no choice but to hand Etherit over to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation. While Duong was walking on the street, she discovered Etherit being taken away by the captain of the security team. Without saying a word, she blocked everyone and begged them to release her husband. But the law is the law. Until there was enough evidence, they just had to follow the procedure and accept the interrogation. The enemy's father knew the head interrogator this time was a glory hound, so he intentionally provoked him, saying if he cracked this big case, he would be promoted. So when Etherit arrived at the interrogation room, the head interrogator gave up on ordinary physical torture, and chose a method of mental torment that was even more unbearable. He lit a burner of hallucinogenic incense, then left, silently waiting for the results. But after 5 whole hours, Etherit would rather endure it than give in. The head interrogator had to continue increasing the dosage until the man absolutely couldn't take it anymore. In another development, Duong was burning with anxiety and sought out Etherit's stepfather, hoping he could think of a way to save her husband. As a result, she discovered that her own carelessness had harmed him. If she hadn't tossed that scented pouch away back then, he wouldn't have been caught because of it. Unable to sleep that night, she went to visit the prison early the next morning but was sternly refused by the head interrogator. At this moment, after a night of torment, Etherit had nearly lost consciousness. The head interrogator took this opportunity to start hypnotizing him, trying to make him admit to the crime of treason. At this point, Duong refused to sit still and wait. She created a diversion to lure the head interrogator and the guards away, while she sneaked inside. She discovered he had been tortured into unconsciousness. It took a lot of effort to wake him up. She intended to help him escape, but the man didn't want to ruin his innocence and forever bear the name of a fugitive. Duong had to disguise herself as a guard and sneak out first. Just as she didn't know what the next step should be to save Etherit, the prince suddenly arrived at the prison to visit his detained best friend. He discovered the head warden was using torture on the prisoner to force a confession. So, he bailed Etherit out, preparing to interrogate him personally. Hearing the news, Duong felt this was a huge opportunity, and immediately hatched a plan to prove her husband's innocence. She secretly sneaked into the room of the thug who stole the weapon blueprints and had been killed, hid a scented pouch stolen from the prince under the floorboards, and then told the stepfather to lead everyone there to search again. Very quickly, the prince's scented pouch was found right there. This also proved that the thug didn't just steal one scented pouch. So, the scented pouch of Etherit discovered at the crime scene naturally couldn't be absolute evidence to convict him. Since no new evidence could be found for the time being, the prince decided to let Etherit out on bail pending trial. After successfully regaining his freedom, he went home and immediately wanted to thank Duong, but he discovered her face was pale and she was extremely weak. It turns out that right when Duong finished hiding the scented pouch and was preparing to leave, she was unfortunately spotted by the guards and then injured in the thigh. Duong suppressed the pain and hurriedly fled. Only then did she luckily escape. Knowing the girl got hurt because of him, he felt extremely guilty and hurriedly ordered the servants to buy styptic medicine to bandage her up. After staying up all night watching over her, Duong was finally barely able to get out of bed and walk. Unexpectedly, the prince led the enemy Sawa over to search. It turns out the guards discovered bloodstains on a banana tree, plus the maid in Etherit's mansion went out in the middle of the night to buy medicine. This made the prince unable to help but suspect that the criminal was in his mansion. In addition, not long before, Sawa, while waiting for the thug to return, had accidentally caught Duong's uncle sneaking into the room, so he suspected he was the one who stole the scented pouch and demanded the man take off his shirt right there to prove it. Unexpectedly, the uncle comfortably stripped down. To keep everyone from discovering the wound on her own body, Duong tried hard to jump up and grab the clothes that the uncle threw onto the roof. Only then did she silence everyone. And before leaving, the prince also cleared Etherit's name, saying that the scented pouch indeed had grass from the temple lawn on it, which also proved that his scented pouch was truly lost near there. Waiting for the prince's group to leave, Etherit hurriedly checked the wound for Duong. Discovering her wound had torn open, he hurriedly applied medicine to stop the bleeding. The man's gentle movements made Duong feel totally unused to it, so she asked him to close his eyes to apply the medicine for her. Unexpectedly, the man's hand stopped at a sensitive spot, scaring her into hurriedly speaking up to stop him. After many days of Etherit's dedicated care, Duong's wound gradually healed. After the girl recovered, her fighting spirit exploded again. Just 2 high kicks directly made his nose bleed. Facing Etherit's infatuated gaze, Duong momentarily forgot to dodge and instead puckered up her lips. She woke up only to realize that just now, it was all just a hallucination. The reality was that Etherit was being suffocated by her handkerchief dance. A few days later, the king led everyone into the mountains. Duong, as a family member of an official, naturally had to tag along. During the break, just as the two were preparing to separate their beds to sleep, they discovered Sawa watching them intently from not far away. Etherit hurriedly hugged Duong, pretending they were a passionately loving couple. Whether out of selfish motives or not, even after seeing Sawa leave, Etherit didn't immediately let go of Duong. Instead, he even teased the girl a bit. Annoyed, Duong went out to find herbs to relieve her stress, completely unaware that the spot had just been marked by a stray dog. It wasn't until the mother and daughter pair of love rivals, who were always looking for trouble, asked her how it tasted that she realized something was wrong. She hurriedly spat out the chewed-up leaf, but a strange taste lingered in her mouth. Accidentally eating something disgusting was bad enough, but those 2 oblivious women kept provoking her. Finally unable to take it anymore, Duong decided to use her fists to teach them a lesson. However, just as she raised her hand, she was caught by the prince's group. Since she was just paid to pretend to be Etherit's wife, Duong had to force a smile and continue maintaining her ladylike image. But the enemy Sawa wanted to make things difficult for them, deliberately asking Etherit who he loved more between the new love and the old flame. This time, Duong seized the opportunity for revenge. She intentionally hugged her husband and started making sarcastic remarks. Seeing Duong offend everyone present with just one sentence, Etherit panicked and pretended to show affection by picking her up and carrying her away, then throwing her onto the bed. He warned Duong to learn some manners and understanding from Isan. Don't go around acting crazy all day, only knowing how to use violence. However, this sentence completely angered Duong. The next second, she started taking her anger out on the bedpost. This moment, Duong felt very aggrieved. She had just barely calmed her anger when it was replaced by hunger. The two were about to go out to eat something when they were blocked by that mother and daughter pair again. They suspected Duong stole their necklace. To prove her innocence, Duong had to let the prince search her tent. Unexpectedly, they actually found a solid gold necklace. The husband gave his wife a resounding slap, criticizing her for stealing his ex-lover's mother's gold necklace, and even laying a hand on the moonlight he loved deeply. However, all of this was just Isan's imagination. Although Duong was a wife Etherit paid to hire, the man gave her absolute trust and doting from beginning to end. In reality, the theft of the necklace this time was also a scheme plotted by the mother and daughter to frame her. Coincidentally, the prince happened to pass by and saw this scene. Since Isan was nominally his dating partner, the prince could only say he found the necklace in the forest. This way he saved face for Isan while returning Duong's innocence. However, Duong, who always believes in an eye for an eye, refused to compromise easily and firmly demanded the mother and daughter apologize before she would let it go. That evening, to coax the upset Duong, Itheret borrowed the candlelight to play shadow puppets with her. The happy laughter of the couple reached the prince not far away, making him start to think about the true meaning of love. However, good things are always ruined by a fly in the ointment. Duong had just fallen asleep when she suddenly noticed someone walking towards their tent. So she hurriedly woke Itheret up, and they pretended to sleep happily in each other's arms. At this moment, the enemy, unable to find an opportunity, left in disappointment. Perhaps it was truly because they were tired from tossing and turning all night, or perhaps because they were greedy for this brief warmth. The two contractually married people spent a quiet night just like that. The next day, the king took his beloved wife's ashes out to sea to scatter them. Duong, seeing the sea for the first time, was extremely excited. The beautiful scenery even made her doubt if she had gone to heaven. Before she could answer Itheret's question, Duong, having accidentally eaten weird-smelling grass earlier, bravely tasted the seawater. But the result was naturally unsatisfactory. Not knowing how many times he had been amused by the girl's carefree actions, his mouth kept urging her not to delay the main business. But after the ritual was completed, he took the girl back to the beach. With permission, Duong first wrote her name on the sand, then quickly rushed into the sea, starting to play to her heart's content, completely unaware that Itheret secretly wrote his name next to hers, looking at her immersed in happiness not far away, smiling like the rising tide. Waiting until Duong played herself out, he took her to a nearby villager's house to change out of her wet clothes. Out of gratitude, Duong gave her Buddha statue to the fake couple, and as a result, received a sapling symbolizing long-lasting love. While this couple was happily planting the love tree, on the other side Isan couldn't smile. The prince, having seen through the nature of love, suggested breaking up with her. This time, the mother and daughter's dream of climbing the social ladder was shattered. Originally having no feelings left for Itheret, Isan decided to go back to her old grazing ground. But the biggest obstacle right now was Duong occupying the position of wife. So she used a high price to bribe a maid in Itheret's mansion, telling her to collect Duong's personal effects for her. They say if you don't do anything shady, you don't fear a knock on the door. Isan had just successfully obtained Duong's hair when she looked up to see the owner herself walking towards her. Unable to hide the panic on her face in time, she could only pretend to be impatient and chase Duong away. Unexpectedly, Duong suddenly told her to just be patient a little longer. Wait until I'm no longer in the mansion, you can come in. It turns out 2 days ago, Itheret had successfully obtained the gun prototype from the arms dealer. After testing the firepower and finding it met standards, the weapons began mass production. This also meant his procurement mission was about to be completed. Then, his contractual relationship with Duong could end. That evening, the two discussed ending this fake marriage. Although both had a lot of lingering affection in their hearts, they both understood this was the destined outcome. However, Duong's well-intentioned reminder sounded like naked mockery to Isan's ears. Unable to contain her anger, Isan tossed the hair to Mr. Lard, planning to pair her love rival with this oily guy. Duong knew nothing about this and was still at home diligently practicing sewing, just to give Itheret a handmade scented pouch before leaving. Unexpectedly, she had only embroidered half the flower when she was discovered by the man who had just returned to the room after a bath. To hide this surprise gift, Duong shyly pretended nothing was happening. But the more silent she was, the more suspicious Itheret became. During the struggle, the girl suddenly had a quick wit, seizing the opportunity to throw the semi-finished product into the corner, then hugged Itheret from behind. Clearly, the two had shared a bed for a night, but for some reason, this hug made Itheret extremely shy. At the same time, Isan took the hair to find a shaman deep in the mountains, begging him to cast a spell to make Duong and Mr. Lard fall in love. The master took out a puppet, started chanting, then poured black pig blood in and stirred it. Not long after, Duong, who was sleeping, was invaded by the black magic. Next, she would uncontrollably approach Mr. Lard. On the street, she confessed her feelings to Mr. Lard. This moment, Duong suddenly snapped back to reality, discovering she was holding hands with a strange greasy man. She immediately pushed him 5 meters away in disgust, then panicked and told Itheret that she might have been put under a spell by someone. Seeing Itheret unable to hold him back, Duong immediately legged it back home. But Mr. Lard, who was also under the spell, was relentless and wouldn't let go. He even dragged Itheret and cornered her in an alley. In her terror, Duong was suddenly controlled by the black magic again, and thus began to act intimately with Mr. Lard against her will. Luckily, at the critical moment, she regained her senses and hurriedly raised her hand to give him a massive punch. Unexpectedly, the man suddenly stood up and lunged at her. Itheret tried to block him in front of Duong, but ended up being crushed flat by Mr. Lard due to being lighter. Seeing that this couldn't go on, Duong had to run home to get her Buddhist prayer beads to fight back. Unexpectedly, as soon as she touched the fabric bag, she was controlled once again. Although Etheret tried hard to stop the two from getting close, the frequency of Duong's episodes increased. In a brief moment of clarity, she told Etheret to quickly give her the fabric bag, then seized the next moment of lucidity to take out the prayer beads, silently chant a mantra, and counterattack the shaman controlling her. On the other side, the shaman realized something was wrong and immediately called his disciples for support. But he was still attacked and defeated by the sudden powerful will. This time the crazy Mr. Lard finally quieted down. To investigate the mastermind behind this, Etheret asked the captain of the security team to search the entire city. As a result, they quickly found the shaman suffering from the backlash of his own magic. The man confessed that the person who hired him was a woman named Isan. Since he had never seen the hirer's real face, the shaman had no way to confront Isan. This also created an opportunity for the girl to show off her acting skills. She used her pitiable, teary eyes to criticize Etheret for not having any trust in her. She successfully made the man remove her from the suspect list out of guilt. When Duong heard her husband intentionally defending Isan, the anger in her heart immediately flared up. But she knew she currently had no standing or evidence to say more. So she had to go outside and vent her anger on an innocent banana tree. Seeing Etheret following her, she even kicked the tree until it broke. The next day, Duong found Isan and her mother and warned them that she was about to leave this place. Before that, she hoped she wouldn't try any more tricks. Considering the matter settled, Duong began to continue finishing the parting gift for Etheret, but discovered the man dressed formally, carrying accessories, preparing to go out. Knowing he had to go to a secret forest to test the firepower of the newly purchased batch of guns, she worriedly wanted to go with him. Being refused, she had to sneakily follow him, but halfway there she was discovered by his vigilance. Regarding the second unexpected kiss between the two, Etheret suddenly felt a bit shy, so he had to pretend nothing happened, then reluctantly took Duong to the designated location to inventory the guns. Since they had to wait for the king to personally come and inspect the power the next day, everyone present had to stay put for the night. During that time, Duong asked the question she had been wondering about for so long. If after she left, would he occasionally think of her? The answer was yes, because she was the most special girl he had ever met. As night fell, Etheret took over the patrol duty for the guards around the perimeter. Duong, feeling bored, suddenly noticed a black shadow flashing by. Realizing something was unusual, she immediately followed to investigate. But she was ambushed by a dart from the person in black. After a few rounds of fierce fighting, Duong was unfortunately knocked unconscious by the opponent. This moment, Ving took off her mask and drew a dagger intending to finish Duong off. But the image of Duong giving her the medicine to cure her seriously ill father a few days ago suddenly flashed in her mind. Having rarely met the only true friend in her life, Ving finally softened her heart and decided to spare Duong. But her mother's life was still in the hands of the leader, so she was forced to complete the mission assigned by him tonight. So Ving went upwind and lit the sleeping incense she had prepared beforehand, waiting until everyone was unconscious before tampering with the gun barrels. The next day, Etheret woke up, and although he felt something was a bit off, recounting the gun showed not a single one was missing, so he didn't think much more of it. As a result, waiting until the king personally inspected the power, all the guns exploded the moment the trigger was pulled. Fragments flew out, accidentally hitting the king in the head. This time, the unconscious Duong was woken up by the loud explosion and screams. She found the dart stuck in the tree, quickly untied herself and ran to the scene, but only saw shattered guns and dried bloodstains. When Duong anxiously ran to the palace to find out the situation, she learned the news that Etheret was being judged by the prince. His enemy took the opportunity to fish in troubled waters, dumping all responsibility on Etheret, making the prince, who was already angry because his father the king was injured, order Etheret to be punished. He was forced to compensate for the soldier's injury costs and imprisoned for 3 years, returning home in helplessness and despair, seeing Duong's eyes full of care and worry. He finally cruelly forced himself to chase her away quickly. Duong knew that after the mission was completed, she had no reason to stay, so she had to painfully take that bottle of precious medicinal wine and set off to leave. But thinking back on the memory she had with Etheret over the past period, tears couldn't help but soak her face. Waiting until Duong left, Etheret finally told the whole truth to his father. However, before he could finish speaking, the captain of the security team arrived with handcuffs to urge him along. At this moment, Duong was preparing to leave the city when she saw 2 fugitives being escorted back, and a familiar image suddenly flashed in her mind. Discovering the captain of the security team was holding the very handcuffs, she immediately realized Etheret was in trouble, fearing he would suffer imprisonment. Sure enough, when she quickly returned to the palace, she saw Etheret being escorted away. So she hurriedly spoke about the incident that happened the previous night. that she had fought with a person in black until she passed out. Duong suspected the batch of weapons had been tampered with by the person in black who attacked her, so Etheret decided to personally test the safety of the remaining guns. As a result, they discovered the guns at the bottom of the chest had absolutely no problems. Therefore, he temporarily received sympathy from the prince, who gave him a little time to catch the real culprit. Originally, this matter no longer concerned Duong, but Etheret, out of selfishness, still begged the girl to stay with him to investigate who the person was that knocked her out that night. After flipping through many documents, based on Duong's description, Etheret learned from a book that ninjas are very good at using darts, and would use a special kind of judo/martial art to subdue enemies. To be able to neutralize the opponent's moves next time they fought, Duong decided to use Etheret as a practice partner. The mastermind of this plan, Sawa, seeing Etheret released innocent once again, immediately realized Duong was not a simple character. So he sought out the gambling-addicted maid in Etheret's mansion, and used money to bribe her to work for him. In the evening, the maid took advantage of the time the two were not home to sneak into their room to spy. As a result, she discovered only traces of one person sleeping on the bed, and also found the book about judo on the table. She immediately used charcoal pencil to copy the key pages, then brought them straight to Sawa and reported the situation. Unexpectedly, this conversation was overheard by Faka, who was sitting in the corner relieving herself. The next day, Faka quickly reported to Duong. Etheret, after knowing there was a mole for the enemy in the house, immediately thought of a countermeasure, to let the maid personally hear that the two of them had consummated their marriage. Etheret first told Duong to shake the bed frame hard to make noise, then stuffed a super sour unripe mango into Duong's mouth, making her make some noises that would force people to get the wrong idea. The maid standing outside listened and couldn't help but feel shy, closing her eyes tight. However, that wasn't all. He took a feather brush and gently tickled Duong's ear, making the girl unable to stand it, bursting into laughter and loudly begging for release. Unexpectedly, the father, who was preparing to find his son to play chess, was outside the door and also misunderstood that the two were in action. To prevent the mole from sneaking in to spy in the middle of the night, Etheret decided to share the bed with Duong. But he was at an age full of energy. Duong's careless sleeping posture really made it a bit unbearable for him. As a result, that night Duong slept soundly, while Etheret tossed and turned all night. The next day, the maid went out to buy things and ran into the eldest Miss Isan, who was taking her anger out on a tree because she couldn't break into Etheret's marriage. She recounted exactly what happened last night. Seeing that at this rate, the two would soon have a baby, Isan decided to use dirty tricks again. She told the maid to drug the mighty Etheret so the man would be slumped and weak for a whole month. However, she forgot to tell the maid that if a woman drank this drug, it would have the opposite stimulating effect. Seeing Etheret about to eat the cake with the drug, Duong arrived just in time to interrupt him. The maid was terrified of an accident, so she immediately asked the nanny in the kitchen, if a drug that makes men weak is taken by a woman, what happens? Hearing the answer, the maid immediately felt she was screwed. Right now, her head was full of indescribable images. Worried, she stood nearby to watch the situation, but after the two finished eating the cake, nothing happened. Unexpectedly, it was because before drugging them, she accidentally tripped over the threshold, spilling half the drug, so the dose wasn't up to standard. Etheret saw Duong eating like a little kitten and stepped forward to gently wipe her mouth. But this sweet scene was interrupted by the prince's sudden visit. It turns out yesterday in the North City, several soldiers were killed by black magic. Suspecting it was caused by a black magic bandit named Suchai, he ordered Etheret to quickly lead troops to catch him. Before leaving, he happened to spot the favorite cake on the table, so he invited Sawa and Father Etheret to enjoy it together. Although the dose of the stimulant Duong ate wasn't large, that evening she still had momentary hallucinations. Regaining her senses, she asked about news of Suchai. Knowing Etheret had to lead troops into the mountains tomorrow to suppress the bandits, she worriedly offered to go along. After all, she had experience dealing with black magic. Unexpectedly, she was refused again. This made Duong, who wholeheartedly wanted to help, very confused. It wasn't until she accidentally overheard Etheret and his father talking that she understood the man didn't let her go because he was worried about her safety. A wave of sweet emotion rose in her heart. But to protect the man who had big love for his country but didn't forget his small love for her, Duong still disguised herself and infiltrated the army. When leading soldiers in a head-on confrontation with Suchai, they discovered his strength was terrifyingly high. He took down all the soldiers with just 2 moves. Etheret refused to back down and decided to fight him to the death, but he basically wasn't his match. Seeing Etheret about to lose his life, Duong used all her strength to swing her blade at Suchai. Unexpectedly, he took Etheret and vanished into thin air. The two fought fiercely deep in the jungle, but no matter how Etheret attacked Suchai, he remained unharmed. The wife realized the enemy practiced extremely powerful black magic, even teleporting, and had kidnapped her commander husband. She had to rely on her sense of smell to track their whereabouts. On the way, she used a breakfast to attract the attention of the spirits in Suchai. Only then did she successfully find Etheret tied up and unable to move. Just as the two prepared to seize the chance to escape, Suchai returned to block the way. Realizing he couldn't beat him, Etheret, to cover Duong's escape, rushed forward selflessly. As a result, he was stabbed in the waist by Suchai. Just when he thought he was a goner, he realized the sword only hit his scabbard. Seeing this, Duong immediately took the chance while Suchai was distracted to draw her blade and attack the enemy's back. But he was invulnerable to normal blades. She had to pull out her Buddhist prayer beads, chant a spell, and then use all her strength to deal him a fatal blow. This time Suchai was finally knocked back 5 meters. The two finally had a breathing spell to escape. But misfortunes never come alone. They hadn't run 500 meters when Duong suddenly had a severe stomach ache and went limp. Etheret had to stay and rest with her. The two lit a campfire by the river for the night. Early in the morning, Etheret carried Duong on his back preparing to go down the mountain, but was blocked again by Suchai who had recovered his magic power. Because of the stomach ache, Duong's fighting power dropped, plus Etheret didn't know black magic. Seeing they were about to become ghosts under Suchai's blade, unexpectedly, his sword shattered at the critical moment. It turns out the condition to practice black magic is to keep the body pure. But just now Duong, who was on her period, intentionally climbed onto Suchai's back, causing his pure body to be defiled by her blood, leading to a lifetime of cultivation turning to nothing. Seeing he was too weak to withstand a blow, the two rushed up to finish him off, wanting to seize this chance to take down the enemy. But Suchai took advantage of Duong's pain to escape quickly. By the time they chased, he was gone. Searching with no results, the two prepared to descend the mountain and met the enemy Sawa, who also came to suppress bandits. Because he was in a hurry to take Duong to the palace for a doctor, Etheret handed the duty of suppressing bandits to Sawa. Little did he know the other guy was the mastermind hiding the fugitive. When Etheret took Duong to the palace for treatment, Duong had fainted from pain. Luckily, there was a professional royal doctor to treat and massage her. Only then did Duong's condition improve a bit. But seeing another man touching his wife, Etheret felt an indescribable irritation in his heart for some reason. And this irritation peaked when the royal doctor came to their house to check on her. He even imagined dealing with the guy 100 times. Then he hurriedly wanted to kick the doctor out, but unfortunately tripped and had close contact with him. Due to occupational habits, the doctor proceeded to check his whole body. The next second, Etheret realized this masculine-looking doctor was actually a sister. After eliminating the fake rival in his heart, Etheret immediately felt relieved and massaged Duong himself. His gentle care and slightly unusual behavior made Duong realize her titular husband was jealous. So she intentionally used words to tease Etheret, wanting to take this chance to make the man realize his inner feelings. Unexpectedly, their relationship, which had just warmed up, hit freezing point again because of Isan. Holding back a belly full of anger, the next day Duong ran into the scheming Isan while buying medicine. To prevent her from pulling any more shady moves, she left a trick up her sleeve before leaving by rubbing star anise powder all over her hands. Just as she guessed, Isan pulled the same old trick, hitting herself and then blaming her. Duong immediately showed her powder-covered hands to fight back, saying that if she really hit her, Isan would definitely smell like star anise. After everyone took turns smelling her to confirm, Duong finally used the truth to prove her innocence. But how could the evil-hearted Isan accept defeat? She would definitely make Duong pay 1,000 times for today's humiliation. Meanwhile, in another development, Sawa's partner, to stop Etheret from investigating the weapon explosion, used Ving's mother's life to force her to assassinate Etheret. Even though Ving didn't want to do it at all, she had to follow orders. In the evening, she suited up and sneaked into Etheret's room. While Duong and her husband were in a cold war and not in the room, she drew her blade to ambush Etheret as he was going to bed. During their fierce fight, the dart on Ving's leg hit Etheret's waist. Etheret desperately threw things around for self-defense. Luckily, the loud noise alerted Duong outside, and she arrived just in time with the dart to save him. Having specifically studied and neutralized judo, Duong finally managed to suppress the enemy. But Ving was crafty. She attacked again by surprise and escaped. Scene change. The man suddenly showed symptoms like he was about to give birth, not only vomiting constantly but also writhing in pain on the bed. The wife beside him was worried and didn't know how to help her husband ease the pain. After a careful checkup, the royal doctor found no abnormalities in the man's body. But this made Duong even more worried. It turns out not long ago, the dark sorcerer under Suchai, after Ving's failed assassination, specifically sought out Etheret's enemy Sawa to team up and finish off the man who messed with their organization. This time he chose to use hard-to-detect dark magic. So Sawa once again bribed the maid who needed gambling money. He told her to stick a red paper with weird characters on Etheret. Sensing the charm was in place, The dark sorcerer immediately started using human bones for his spell. He threw a piece of a skull into the tool, and soon a puff of black smoke flew toward Etheret. The charm was activated, and Etheret, who was sleeping, suddenly felt extremely uncomfortable. Right now his stomach felt like elephants were dancing inside. Duong had no idea and thought her husband's old illness had come back, so she just panicked and worried. However, the royal doctor couldn't find the cause of the sudden sickness. Late at night, Etheret's condition got worse and worse. Seeing things were bad, Duong finally started to suspect her husband was under a dark spell. Just then, Etheret's ex-girlfriend Isan suddenly visited. Duong planned to use her husband's illness as an excuse to turn her away. But hearing Isan's name, Etheret immediately woke up and insisted on seeing her. What surprised Duong even more was that as soon as he saw Isan, his symptoms eased up as if the pain was just a hallucination. But worried about her husband's health, Duong still forced Etheret back to the room to rest. As soon as he lay on the bed, the sickness came back. This time the pain was even more intense, making Etheret roll around on the bed in agony. Realizing she was the cure, Isan happily started visiting every day, not even caring about personal space to treat him up close. The results were so clear that Etheret immediately jumped up. While everyone was amazed by this miracle, they had no idea it was only because the dark sorcerer was taking a break. Duong, being sharp, realized something was wrong, noticing that whenever her husband left the room, his symptoms eased. But seeing this, she couldn't help but believe Isan was the best medicine. Disappointed, she fell into self-doubt, feeling like she was the jinx hurting her husband. However, a second later, her thoughts were proven right. Etheret's stomach pain had just eased a bit, but as soon as Duong got close, he started hurting badly again, even groaning in pain. Little did she know, this was because the dark sorcerer was back on shift. Helpless, Duong had to leave the room in a panic, but the more she thought about it, the more it felt wrong. She suddenly realized Etheret might really be under a dark spell. While Duong hadn't figured out how to break it, Etheret's stepfather was suddenly sent by the prince to continue suppressing bandits in the mountains. This was actually Sawa's plan to kill two birds with one stone. Without the father and son in his way, he could make a fortune by selling low-quality weapons, and the enemy could easily break into the city. Etheret's stepfather knew this trip was dangerous, so before leaving, he entrusted his sixth son to Duong. Duong, being loyal and grateful, had just promised to take good care of her husband when Etheret suddenly started twitching all over, looking like he was about to die. Duong finally discovered writing appearing on his back. Feeling it was familiar, she used a mirror to look, and clearly the word death was written there. This time, Duong was finally sure her husband had been cursed. But with so many types of dark magic, she didn't know the right cure. So she had to go to the temple to ask a high monk for help. She accidentally found out Sawa was about to take over the unfinished weapon deal. In a rush, she suddenly remembered the sorcerer in prison who had used dark magic on her before, so she hurried to find him to ask for a way to break it. After hearing it, the sorcerer's face turned serious. He said this kind of death curse has no magic to break it. The only way is a transfer. But if the person doing the transfer makes a tiny mistake, the curse will stick to them. Even though she knew this way was super dangerous, she couldn't bear to see Etheret pass out from pain, so Duong decided to take the risk. After giving Etheret a gentle goodbye kiss, Duong started the spell to transfer the curse from him. A miracle didn't happen. Right after, the curse characters on Etheret's back disappeared, and he woke up. But Duong, having lost too much energy, collapsed on the spot. Etheret didn't understand what happened, so he quickly turned Duong over, and was horrified to see those creepy characters appear on her back. Duong's followers were helpless. The curse had completely transferred and couldn't be broken. Duong woke up with a weak smile, saying all of this was worth it. It turned out that in her heart, Etheret wasn't just a special person but also the hope of the country. She was willing to trade her life for his so he could live and protect the people. Just then, the maid gave Etheret the farewell letter Duong had already written. It turns out the reason she agreed to be his fake wife was to get 1,000-year ginseng as payment to treat her sick father back home. Knowing she might not make it, she wrote the letter in advance, begging Etheret to bring the ginseng to save her father if she died. Etheret put the ginseng down, and his follower took it back to Duong's father. In another scene, Sawa was tricking the prince into buying local weapons. Wasn't this 100 times better than Etheret's junk? As he was talking his head off, Etheret, who was supposed to be dying, suddenly appeared. Weren't you supposed to be at death's door? Why are you so healthy now? Etheret just glanced over and commented that the stuff looked good, but from head to toe it was all European technology. This material, this craftsmanship. Local workshops couldn't have made this. It's clearly an import made to look like a local model. Sawa was fuming. You have the nerve to speak? Your father cleared out the entire armory to go fight, and there hasn't been a word from him since. If bandits attack right now, how are we supposed to defend the city? This left Etheret completely speechless. The prince asked how long it would take to get local supplies. Sawa was secretly thrilled but kept a straight face. He said it would take only 7 days. Just as the prince was about to place the order, the stepfather suddenly returned in a grand triumph. The bandits were defeated, and the armory was immediately replenished. Back at home, Sawa was boiling with rage. He thought his plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone would wipe out Etherit's entire family, but instead, Etherit was healthy and his father was safe. The sorcerer by his side was even more confused. This is impossible. How could my master-level curse fail? He didn't know the curse had been transferred. Unable to figure it out, he decided to hold nothing back and used a high-level magic ritual to turn Duong into ash. Duong suddenly let out a gut-wrenching scream. An invisible force was tearing her insides apart. At that same moment, a mysterious man was flying across the land, arriving with incredible speed. The royal doctor said bluntly, "Duong probably won't make it through the night." Etherit couldn't accept it. Even worse, Duong started vomiting blood. The sorcerer felt her stubborn resistance and launched his final blow. Duong couldn't take any more. With her last bit of strength, she said her goodbyes. Etherit held her cold body and screamed in grief, but there was no response. Just then, the mysterious man suddenly appeared. He didn't explain much. He just used one finger to paralyze the stepfather. With one look, he accurately diagnosed it as a death curse. He pulled out an ancient candle to start a counter-ritual. On the other side, the sorcerer felt a massive wave of resistance. The mysterious man whispered a spell, and the death curse was instantly shattered. He called her name repeatedly, forcing Duong's soul back into her body. Far away, the sorcerer's body was suddenly covered in wrinkles and began to waste away. The next day, Duong woke up feeling refreshed, though she was a bit dazed. She clearly remembered being cold and dead. How was she alive? What really made her break down was seeing her father right in front of her. If her father found out she was the daughter-in-law of the Kuan family, she could never explain the fake marriage, and he would probably punish her on the spot. Luckily, the maid reported what happened last night. It turned out Duong's father had arrived just in time and used all his spiritual power to save her. He was currently meditating to recover. Duong was terrified and decided to hide. She had to play dead, she absolutely had to. Just then, Etherit and his father returned. Duong's father saw right through her act and said on purpose, "Well, since she won't wake up, I guess we'll just sacrifice 9 buffaloes to the heavens." Hearing that animals would be killed, Duong woke up immediately, pretending to yawn. Just then, her companion arrived. After all, he didn't have the supernatural speed of Duong's father. Duong quickly pulled him to a corner to talk privately. "You didn't tell him about the fake marriage, did you?" The companion shook his head frantically in fear. He wouldn't dare. If Duong's father knew the truth, he'd definitely tear the Kuan family's house apart. Duong rushed to coordinate with Etherit and his father. "You absolutely cannot say we are husband and wife. Just say I'm a servant." The only way to stay alive was to tell everyone not to talk to her father. But Etherit and the stepfather were panicking. Everyone knew she was Etherit's wife, especially the prince. If it got out, it would be a crime of deceiving the king, which was a death sentence. But for now, the 3 of them had to bite the bullet and keep acting. Duong thanked her father for saving her life, and he emotionally thanked the Kuan family for being generous enough to give the life-saving ginseng. Etherit told him not to mention it. That ginseng was just Duong's wages. Thinking the small talk was over, Duong urged her father to go back to their hometown to rest. But then, the prince suddenly visited, saying he was there to see the severely ill wife. Etherit and his father's faces went white. They quickly pushed Duong's father into the inner room to hide. But despite all their planning, they forgot that Duong's father had left his medicinal oil behind. The royal doctor had previously declared Duong was at death's door, but now the prince saw Duong looking perfectly healthy, which left him with a head full of questions. Right then, Duong's father came back to get his oil. The stepfather had no choice but to introduce him as Duong's father. Duong broke into a cold sweat. She grabbed the oil and tried to push her father away, but the prince enthusiastically pulled him back to chat. Seeing the lie was about to be exposed, Duong suddenly stayed in character and started coughing violently. Finally, Duong practically dragged her father away, and the crisis was temporarily avoided. Unexpectedly, Duong's father found the curse charm under the bed. "Why is this under the bed?" He angrily pointed out that the Kuan family had a mole who wanted to hurt them. The stepfather was furious. Which servant is so evil? Etherit frowned. They had to drag this mole out. Duong glanced around. If someone couldn't wait to commit murder, then they'd just have to wait and see. The traitor would eventually show their tail. Scene change. The man was enjoying an exclusive massage from his ex-girlfriend, while the wife, Duong, stood by silently watching. Could this be the legendary love triangle? It all started with Isan's secret letter. To investigate the secrets of Etherit and Duong, Isan had asked a relative in Bangkok to dig around. After all, Duong claimed to be studying in Bangkok but was actually taking night classes and then had a shotgun wedding. Nobody but a fool would believe that explanation. Since sending the letter, Isan had been chasing the mailman every day for a reply. A servant overheard this, and the news quickly reached Duong. Worried, she dragged Etheret to plan a strategy. Whatever will be, Isan excitedly received the reply. They were in trouble. Now, the only way was to stop Isan from reading the content. What to do? They had to use a handsome man tactic. Just as Isan caught a glimpse of the keywords Bangkok study, her mother suddenly announced Etheret was visiting. Her love-struck brain immediately kicked in. Isan dropped the letter and ran out. Etheret had to bite the bullet and make boring small talk to stall for time. Meanwhile, Duong sneaked into the room to steal a look at the secret letter. She found that the relative confirmed Etheret was indeed a pure student with no romantic scandals in Bangkok. She pulled out a pen and started editing the content. At the same time, Isan was dragging Etheret back to her room. There's a cat in my room that knows how to do somersaults. Etheret was breaking into a cold sweat. The moment the door opened, Duong was crouching in the corner. Etheret talked nonsense like crazy to grab Isan's attention. Seeing she was about to be spotted, Etheret suddenly got into character, pretending the medicine he drank was causing an old injury to flare up. It hurt so much. Isan immediately started massaging him. Hearing Etheret's flirtatious and enjoyable sounds, Duong grit her teeth in anger and flicked a dart to knock Isan out. On the way back, Etheret comforted the jealous Duong, and his psychological move made her blush. On the other side, Isan woke up with a blank mind, not knowing when Etheret had left. She continued reading the letter, but the content had been edited by Duong without a single flaw. The letter now clearly stated he was a total playboy, chasing girls everywhere and never behaving himself. She was shaking with rage. It turned out Etheret was also a bad boy. Her mother, standing beside her, advised her daughter to keep an open mind, saying that all men are like that. At the same time, Duong was still basking in the glow of Etheret's confessions, secretly smiling with joy. She turned to massage her father, telling him she was fully recovered and he could go home. Her father agreed out loud, but secretly he thought his daughter was tired of him, so he left without saying goodbye. Etheret, seeing that something was wrong, quickly told Duong to chase after him and even gave her some dry rations he had prepared, telling her to give them to his future father-in-law to eat on the road. Duong finally caught up with her father and hurriedly explained everything. While they were resting, her father was praising Etheret for being a good boss and even preparing food. However, some maids from the house happened to be drinking at the next table and started spilling the tea about the fake wedding. When Duong's father heard this, he spat out his tea in shock. Meanwhile, Duong was looking sadly at a hole in the curtain, intending to thread a needle to fix it. Etheret insisted on helping her. Right at that moment, her father returned, looking like he was out for blood. Hearing the playful sounds of a couple coming from the room, he immediately imagined 100 bad scenarios. He intended to charge in but was afraid of seeing his daughter half-dressed. Finally, he decided to kick the door down. As soon as the door flew open, Duong immediately lunged out to protect her husband. Her father, being suspicious, forced his daughter to swear a solemn oath and tell the truth. Duong swore that they were truly husband and wife. This left her father stunned. Seeing that the deed was done, he had no choice but to accept it. After all, his daughter liked the man, so even if he wasn't happy about it, he had to compromise. Later, Duong explained to Etheret that if they told the truth, her father would definitely force them to live apart, which would ruin their big mission. Just as their fake-turned-real romance was progressing well, trouble struck again. That day, Duong's father said he had to go home early because he had left things in the hands of Kage for too long. As soon as she heard that name, Duong immediately panicked. Etheret noticed something was off and quickly asked, "Who on earth is Kage?" It turned out Kage was Duong's childhood sweetheart. Her father didn't see a problem with it, saying, "She already belongs to Etheret, so what's the harm in talking about the past?" To ease the awkwardness, Etheret's stepfather suggested they keep playing ball. Unexpectedly, he kicked the ball and it flew straight toward Duong. Suddenly, a handsome, mysterious man appeared and saved the day. Talk about the devil and he shall appear. It turned out Kage missed her so much that he had traveled 1,000 miles to find her. Duong's father was about to introduce him to Etheret, but Duong fearfully cut him off. Standing nearby, Etheret was already burning with jealousy. Duong was still trying to think of a way to explain the fake marriage, but Kage didn't give her a chance, saying he came there specifically for her. Etheret hid in a corner, feeling his heart break into a million pieces. Duong's father also felt his daughter was trying to hide the fact that she was married. He thought it was simple, so he called Kage over. "My daughter is already married to Etheret." Kage felt like he had been struck by lightning. Late at night, Etheret questioned Duong. Seeing her hesitate, Etheret acted like a relationship expert. "If he truly loves you, he will wait," he said. Duong was unhappy and shot back, "Are you applying your logic with Isan to me? If we were fake married for 10 years, would your Isan wait?" Etheret blurted out a confession, and even he was startled by his own words, so he quickly ended the topic. Elsewhere, Duong's father was giving some counseling to the devastated Kage. Kage remembered his childhood as an orphan, when only little Duong promised she would never abandon him. That vow was still ringing in his ears, yet now she was someone else's wife. The next day, the soccer match became a life-or-death battle between rivals. Fighting for the ball was like fighting for a wife. Itheret refused to lose and kept pulling off difficult moves. In the end he won 3-1. Although Kage lost, he still spoke bitter words, saying he would wait until the end of time, until his very last breath. Duong told Kage straight out, "I'm married, don't wait for me anymore." Unexpectedly, Itheret overheard this a second later. Kage was also a hopeless romantic and insisted on waiting, even forcing her to accept a token of his love. She turned around and bumped into Itheret's gloomy presence. Itheret started working overtime like crazy to numb himself. Duong cared about him, but she was met with a cold war from him. The next day, his stepfather immediately saw through his son's heartbreak. Little did he know, Itheret was planning to set the two of them up, wanting to set Duong free so she could return to the person she loved. At the same time, Duong went to the kitchen herself to cook a catfish dish, which was Itheret's favorite. He also knew she made it specifically for him. Unexpectedly, she was intercepted by Kage on the way. He devoured the fish and then dragged Duong off to have lunch for two. Halfway there, Duong told Kage to go eat by himself. She went back to the kitchen to make another catfish dish. But Itheret was already drowning in jealousy, and he felt nothing even when looking at his favorite fish. That night, he even slept outside. The next day, while they were out making merit, the first thing Duong asked was why Kage hadn't come. That sentence made Itheret explode with jealousy on the spot. It turned out Duong was just afraid Kage might be sick in a strange place. Itheret was grumpy all the way home. At the dinner table, everyone was happy except for the two of them. On the surface, they were having a cold war, but their eyes were frantically stealing glances at each other. Kage finally couldn't sit still anymore. Seeing his dream girl and Itheret getting closer, a wicked thought crossed his mind. He secretly found a shaman, intending to cast a love spell on Duong. Unexpectedly, as soon as the shaman heard Duong's name, his legs started shaking with fear. "It's because of that woman that I just got out of jail." Just then, Isan also came to see the shaman, angrily shouting, "The spell didn't work last time. Give me my money back." The two of them immediately started arguing and exposing each other. By a twist of fate, Kage and Isan bumped into each other. These two people, driven crazy by love, hit it off immediately. "If you love Duong and I love Itheret, then let's team up to break them up and take back the love that belongs to us." Kage made the first move. He pretended he wanted to go into the forest to pick wild fruit. The innocent Duong fell for the trap and went with him. At the same time, Isan lied and said her mother had a cold, the pharmacy was closed, and she desperately needed herbs from the forest. Itheret, seeing it was getting dark and worrying for her safety, had to go into the forest with her. Inside the forest, Kage walked a few steps, fell and sprained his ankle, just as he happened to find an abandoned wooden cabin. He grabbed his ankle and groaned in pain. Duong had to help him into the cabin to rest. As soon as they entered, Kage secretly left a mark at the door and then suddenly claimed he was hot, starting to loosen his clothes, and even acted cutely, asking Duong to rub medicinal oil on him. At that moment, Isan received the signal, a bird call. When Kage heard it, he immediately pretended he was cured and wanted to go home. Isan happened to lead Itheret right past the cabin. Itheret immediately saw Kage with his clothes somewhat disheveled. His blood pressure spiked. He was about to charge in, but Isan covered his eyes. This act of covering his eyes was the spark that set off Itheret's imagination. He went crazy imagining all sorts of intimate scenes. Itheret's heart was shattered. That night, the whole family was having dinner happily. Itheret, who usually didn't touch alcohol, was drinking like crazy. A nameless fire was rising in him. Without a word, the two men started a drinking contest. Kage continued his attack, pretending to ask a legal question. "In our place, is it illegal to be unfaithful to someone? Or, in the case that the woman is willing?" That sentence hit Itheret's sore spot. He broke down and went to confess to his father. It was clearly just a contract marriage, but it hurt so much he couldn't breathe. He made a firm decision. Only by letting go could Duong find her happiness. Little did he know, Isan was quick to add fuel to the fire. She intentionally revealed that the whole town was gossiping about how Duong and Kage were going on dates in different places every day. The hatred of having his wife stolen plus the insult to his character made Itheret agitated to the point of losing control. He finally opened his mouth to question Duong. Unexpectedly, she appeared extremely innocent. She had just taken his older brother to pick wild berries. He sprained his ankle, so they went into the Hoa house to rest a bit before coming back. Her eyes were clear, not looking like she was lying. At this moment, Itheret finally sobered up temporarily. This woman had saved his life after all. After imagining a whole 360-episode Thai drama in his head, He finished comforting himself. The next second, he carefully asked the question he had suppressed for a long time. If our marriage wasn't forced? He had a question that made Duong stunned. Itirit tried to stay calm and told Duong to think carefully, clarify her feelings and then answer him. The next day, the old master blocked his daughter's path, bluntly saying he wanted a grandchild to hold, urgent as if fire were burning nearby. Duong's eyes dodged frantically. She stammered that she wasn't ready yet. Father Duong frowned and asked a fatal question. Is it because you aren't ready? Or does your husband have a problem? This blunt question made Duong blush bright red, and she turned around and walked away. To have a grandchild soon, it seemed he had to take action himself to help his son-in-law become stronger. He secretly placed a specially made candle in the room. Unexpectedly, as soon as the candle burned, Duong inhaled the scent. Her eyes immediately became dreamy, and she mumbled, I really want to eat something special. At the same time, Itirit also inhaled the scent. Tonight I will let you know who is actually eating whom. But the very next second, both of them suddenly sobered up, realizing something was wrong. This wasn't a normal candle, but a type of candle used to stimulate buffalo reproduction. He panicked and blew it out but accidentally inhaled a deep breath. It's over. He would definitely lose sleep tonight. The drug's effect quickly kicked in. Reason completely disappeared. You can do whatever you want. The two tugged back and forth between clarity and haziness. Outside in the yard, Father Duong was still happily naming his grandchild. The next morning, both of them had panda eyes, leaning back to back, bound together all night. It turned out that even though he was tortured by the drug to the point of exploding on the spot, he absolutely would not take advantage of someone's difficulty to harm her purity. He tried hard to hold back all night long. She was completely moved by this respect and suddenly leaned closer. There is something on your eyelash. Seizing the opportunity, this kiss was to thank him for his respect, and also represented the flutter in her heart. Late at night, a group of bandits used a scent to hypnotize the whole herd of buffalo and stole them all. The next day, Father Duong flew into a rage. How dare they steal right from the head of a buffalo merchant like him? He immediately divided his troops into two routes to give chase. Not getting very far, Itirit and Duong heard a noise. The bandits were resting on the road, and Duong angrily rushed straight up, but unexpectedly the other side was fully armed. In an instant, a rain of bullets surrounded the two. Itirit had an idea. It turned out he intentionally took off his shirt as bait. He had already seen that this was a batch of low-quality smuggled weapons. Sure enough, the henchmen's guns all exploded on the spot. Without needing to lift a finger, they were all taken down. Finally, only the leader remained, and he was directly taken down by Duong. Itirit stepped up to question the origin of the batch. The bandit stammered to stall for time, and as a result, he took the chance to cut the rope and run away. The two hurriedly chased after him, but hadn't run far before they burst out laughing. That unlucky bandit fell into a trap by himself. The trap was too high to climb out of, so he had to beg the two to save him. Itirit took the chance to ask again about the source of the weapons. The bandit immediately admitted defeat. He found them in a cave in the forest. It was full of weapons inside, and he promised to draw a map for them. Finally, the bandit received a single room in jail. Itirit, with the help of Duong, unexpectedly discovered the secret about the weapon warehouse. The two fought side by side, and their feelings quickly escalated. But unexpectedly this warm scene was seen entirely by Kage hiding in the shadows. His teeth were almost grinding to dust. Itirit immediately went to the Crown Prince to report. He planned to go investigate alone because he thought going with many people would easily alert the enemy. Crown Prince Zhang Han's 10,000 words were summed up in one sentence. Be careful. Returning home to find Father Duong to entrust his final affairs, his heart was heavy. The mission tonight was too dangerous. He didn't dare tell Duong, fearing she would follow. He tremblingly took out a letter specifically instructing, if I meet with any mishap tonight, give this letter to Duong. Just then, Father Duong suddenly bestowed a mysterious blessing upon Itirit. A stream of golden light covered him. He felt his whole body filled with strength. Father Duong outwardly said this was a normal family blessing, but in reality, he had passed on the protective artifact, the Golden Bell Shield, to him. The assistant saw this and was bewildered. The Golden Bell Shield is passed to men, not women. So even if he couldn't give it to Duong, why pass it to Itirit? Father Duong believed that only Itirit was qualified to inherit this holy item. Unexpectedly, as soon as Itirit left, Father Duong became significantly weaker, and the assistant was also confused. Who would have guessed that as soon as Itirit stepped out the door? The Crown Prince had been waiting for a long time. Brotherhood cannot be outdone. He insisted on living and dying together with Itirit. At this moment in the cave, the bandits and Fing were frantically moving house. It turned out they had discovered they were being watched and were planning to find another place to move their base. Suddenly, there was a strange noise outside the cave. Itirit and the Crown Prince had found this place. It takes time to say but happened quickly. Fing threw a hidden weapon, and the four immediately rushed into a chaotic fight. Elsewhere, Duong finally realized something was unusual, vaguely guessing that Atirat had gone to find the mountain cave. She hurriedly wanted to rush out the door to find him but was held back by the weakened Father Duong. Don't panic. Your Atirat is no longer the man he used to be. Sure enough, inside the cave, although Atirat was beaten up by the bandits, he suddenly realized the divine power of the Golden Bell shield and immediately became invincible. Even though swords slashed his body, he stood firm without a scratch. The bandits were stunned, but outside the cave, it was even more dramatic. The Crown Prince fought for a long time only to discover his opponent was the person in his heart, Fing. Fing then cried and confessed that the bandits had raised her since she was small, so finally, she had to stab herself to fake a defeat and then turned around to disappear. Seeing they couldn't win, the bandits used smoke bombs to escape in the chaos. The Crown Prince returned to the cave and revealed shocking news. The person who just fought with him was actually Fing from home. Duong was waiting anxiously when Atirat finally returned in a messy state. I was so worried about you. But he walked past his wife straight to his father-in-law. For the life-saving grace of the Golden Bell shield, he immediately kowtowed to give thanks. Father Duong was very humble. This matter requires thanking you yourself. It is your character that made the divine artifact work. Finally, the two hugged each other. Sweet enough to give you cavities, but they didn't know this warm scene was seen entirely by that guy Kagya. He ground his teeth in hatred. I worked like a horse for you for so many years, yet you passed the secret technique to an outsider? You damn old man, just you wait. Switching scenes to a few days ago, Atirat was framed by someone. The weapons deal failed, causing serious losses. Although given time, he still couldn't find evidence proving his innocence. Sawa and his son frantically applied pressure, forcing the prince to punish him. The prince knew he was innocent, but due to the pressure, he was helpless. The final verdict is in 3 days. The charge is neglecting duty. The minimum sentence is 10 years in prison. The prince said, "Take the chance to run away now, I won't chase you." Back home, Atirat suppressed his pain and said, "Duong, hurry and take father back to the countryside to hide." Duong was immediately indignant for him, selling his life for the country only to end up like this? She suspected the person who framed him was the black-clad person, Fing. She decided she must hunt down the culprit to prove Atirat's innocence. Unfortunately, 3 days isn't enough to find tracks. She decided to lock onto the key target. Just sticking to Fing would definitely lead to the truth. In another development, Sawa frantically pressured the prince to buy weapons from domestic merchants. The prince was forced to compromise, setting the inspection for the next day. Time was urgent. Duong took out the Agarwoo tracking box. Sure enough, the smoke column flew straight in one direction like it was possessed, but rushing in would definitely alert the enemy. Seeing a closed stall nearby, the two looked at each other and immediately changed outfits. The smoke finally stopped at an abandoned brick kiln. Looking closely, the target was Fing. Duong glanced over, and Atirat immediately understood. He used the excuse of wanting to buy the whole brick kiln to take the chance to control Fing. Atirat had sharp eyes. One look and he saw smuggled weapons hidden under the bricks. Her identity exposed, Fing removed her disguise and burst into tears telling her hardships. It turned out she was captured and raised by bandits since she was small. Her mother was held hostage to force her to commit crimes. Hearing such a desperate situation, Duong announced, "I will help you." The rescue operation began. Following the address Fing provided, they found the bandits' hideout. The signal went off, and Duong prepared to jump out. Atirat pulled her back to say some sweet words. Unexpectedly, Fing betrayed Duong. The two immediately rushed into a brawl. A cold light flashed in Fing's eyes. White knife in, red knife out. Duong fell down, blood dyeing the ground red. At the same time, Atirat sneaked into the house to find Fing's mother. Hearing a noise, the bandit turned around. Fing hurriedly shook Duong awake. "It's over," discovered. It turned out it was all a bitter meat trick involving self-injury. That wound was a blood bag prepared beforehand, just to fool the suspicious bandit and buy time for Atirat to rescue Fing's mother. At this moment inside the house, Atirat was frantically looking for the key. But unexpectedly the enemy was right behind him. The bandit threw a rope around Atirat from behind. Duong and Fing rushed in just in time. The three fought in chaos. Seeing the situation was lost, the bandit escaped. Atirat chased after him relentlessly, leaving Duong and Fing to care for her mother. Finally, Fing found the antidote bottle and hurriedly gave it to her mother, who knew the next second her mother would vomit blood. It was poison. On the other side, Atirat had controlled the bandit. He smiled sinisterly and told the cruel truth. There is basically no real antidote in this world. Seeing Fing's mother in critical condition, Duong decided to take her back to find someone to save her. Duong's servant brewed herbal medicine bowl after bowl and poured it down, but she was still in a coma. Not until the next morning did Fing's mother wake up. At this moment, Sawa was still at the trading spot, waiting anxiously. The result he waited for was a big gift Itirit brought, the bandit himself. This guy was the culprit who ruined the weapon test. Sawa still stubbornly denied it. Unexpectedly, Itirit flipped his hand and pulled out the bandit's secret ledger, which clearly recorded how to sabotage the deal and the bribery of officials. Sawa immediately broke into a cold sweat. Unfortunately, the ledger didn't write the official's name. The prince ordered to continue interrogating the bandit. Itirit was cleared of injustice. The prince immediately declared him innocent, then turned to question Sawa why he tried to push this deal, swearing to investigate to the end. Next, the prince personally visited Fing and her mother and even gave precious tonics. Fing cried like a pear blossom in the rain, regretting helping the bandits, but the prince's love brain had activated and he didn't hear a word of it. He waved his hand, directly pardoning Fing, and said she atoned for her crimes by helping catch the bandit. Truly a great meritorious official. Internal rebellion just quelled, external invasion arrived. News came that the enemy was about to attack. The foreign weapon merchant was also released. Itirit quickly finished testing the new weapons. This time it was all high-quality stuff. Itirit wanted to dance one song with Duong, considering it a perfect goodbye. The two hugged and danced, the scene extremely romantic, but they didn't know that ahead were even more dangerous challenges waiting. The mole Sawa had long colluded with evil forces, coordinating inside and outside, preparing to bring disaster to the city. Itirit was still worrying about state affairs when his love rival Kage blocked him halfway. Hearing there was a riot, he guessed right away Itirit planned to find Duong for help. His eyes were full of disdain and sarcasm. A 7-foot man, yet every time cheating that silly girl into selling her life for him. A useless freeloader. Itirit was hit in his sore spot. He actually felt Kage made sense. However, Duong was still wholehearted in wanting to help him. Unexpectedly, the next second, Itirit suddenly turned hostile. Our marriage agreement ends here. He urged Duong to pack up and leave his house. Duong's heart was broken. She took her father back to the countryside. Resting in the deep forest halfway, she heard a noise. It turned out to be the long-haired bandit gathering troops. They prepared to rob the Westerners' batch of cannons. Disaster was imminent. Duong was still worried about the bad boy, and decided to risk returning to report the news. Her father agreed. You go fast and come back fast. We will walk slowly and wait for you. Watching the person he loved jump into the fire for someone else again, Kage felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. At the same time, Yi-san came to the door to offer her attentiveness. She twisted and posed, offering a love dinner. Who knew Itirit was too lazy to even lift his eyelids, only caring about his career. Yi-san was also ruthless. She directly used a fake fall trick to get herself and her clothes dirty. Itirit helplessly told the servant to take her to change clothes. Ironically, Duong just returned and bumped into the maid holding Yi-san's dirty clothes. This maid also knew how to act, opening her mouth to make up a story. These are Miss Yi-san's clothes from staying overnight last night. Then she immediately ran to report the merit she just earned. Yi-san heard this, her heart bloomed. She seized the golden opportunity when Itirit didn't know yet, running in front of Duong to provoke her. Didn't you leave? Why come back after just one day? Duong was about to explain when Yi-san dealt a fatal blow. We were intimate last night. Now we are truly husband and wife. Duong tried to suppress the heartache, wrote down the intelligence about the bandits attacking the city, and asked Yi-san to pass it on. Who knew she wouldn't even look at it, directly telling the servant to burn it. Duong hid in the shadows, seeing Itirit and Yi-san looking intimate from afar, thinking the two were really stuck together like glue. She could only cry in grievance. In another development, the prince predicted the bandits would attack from the north, immediately ordering Itirit to escort the batch of cannons to the north right in the night. To be safe, the prince also sent Fing along to protect. Unexpectedly, the mole Sawa had easily extracted the intelligence long ago. The entire action plan was revealed completely. The prince and Itirit were still thinking they crossed the sea successfully by disguising themselves. Sure enough, halfway they encountered a trap. In an instant, black smoke was everywhere. Fing glanced once and realized this was just a clumsy trap. A dart flew out, and the blinding spell immediately lost its power. The long-haired bandit was stunned. Why did my invincible magic lose its effect? The bandit looked up and bumped into his old subordinate, Fing. Fing rushed up to deal with him. Over here, Itirit easily took down a group but couldn't hurt the long-haired bandit. It turned out this devil had mastered the Golden Bell shield, impervious to swords and spears. He smiled sinisterly and attacked. Although Itirit had lower martial arts skills, he still relied on his own defense to tough it out. Unexpectedly, the sinister devil circled behind him. With just one move, the defensive layer shattered. In a critical moment, Itirit remembered a trick. He grabbed some sand, threw it in his face, and then bolted. As for Fing, seeing her falling into a disadvantageous position, the prince rushed out to help. The bandit saw the situation wasn't good and hurriedly ran away. But during the chaotic fight, The prince was unlucky enough to get hit by a poison arrow. The toxicity was very strong. Fing didn't think twice. She immediately put her mouth to the wound to suck out the poison, preferring to die herself rather than let anything happen to him. Just then, Duong passed by and met Fing, who had just returned from getting water. Hearing the news that Atirat was ambushed, her face changed drastically, and she turned around, running frantically to find him. Fing hurriedly returned to the prince. He was in a coma and couldn't drink the antidote water. She gritted her teeth and used her mouth to feed him water sip by sip. Sure enough, love created a miracle. The prince woke up. Duong was still angry, her face cold as money as she reminded him, "Now you and I don't owe each other anything." Atirat was surprised and asked, "Why are you here?" She just said faintly, "On the way. I met Fing and heard the news that the cannons were robbed. Duong decided to take them back for you." At this moment, the long-haired bandit was stroking his war spoils, smiling smugly. He ordered the gathering of hundreds of desperados, just waiting for the troops to assemble to dye the whole city in blood. He also didn't forget to reward based on merit, throwing a large bag of gold and silver to Sawa, the one who secretly reported the news. "We attacked the city in 2 days. You'd better run away first." Unexpectedly, Sawa laughed coldly. His great vengeance hadn't been avenged, so how could he leave easily? If he didn't resolve Atirat with his own hands, he would absolutely not give up. Duong followed the tracks all the way to the bandit's lair. Atirat suddenly turned hostile again. "Between us, the love is gone. Why must we drag this out?" Duong's heart shattered. "Fine, leave." Atirat watched her back and thought silently. "Go." After getting past the blinding spell, he rushed into the tiger's den alone. Duong was ultimately still worried and came back, but as a result, she was captured alive as soon as she entered the mechanism. It turned out Atirat had long embraced a death wish, secretly connecting the fuse, planning to activate the gunpowder to perish together with the enemy. Hanging by a thread, the subordinate escorting Duong appeared. "Move, and I'll kill her first." For eyes met, their minds were already in sync. Atirat forcefully lit the fuse. Sparks flew everywhere. Right when everyone was in panic, Duong struggled free from her bonds. The two ran away as fast as lightning. Just having escaped danger, Duong intended for them to go their separate ways. Atirat couldn't suppress his longing and hugged her tightly in his arms. She tried hard to struggle. "The matter of you being intimate with someone else. I still remember it." Atirat was bewildered. Suddenly there was a noise in the forest. Duong hurriedly pulled him to hide. Sure enough, the long-haired bandit had chased after them. The two discussed a plan in a secret spot. Duong wanted to fight side by side with Atirat. "If we join forces, we will definitely win." Atirat's heart burned hot. At this moment, the roar of the long-haired bandit was right nearby. Unexpectedly, Atirat sneak attacked from behind. But this bandit had the golden bell shield, impervious to swords and spears. Atirat's punches and kicks were no different than scratching an itch. Duong rushed out to help but was blocked by his subordinate. A dark spell was cast, and the two were immediately frozen on the spot, unable to move. In the moment of life and death, Atirat sincerely confessed his love, promising that in the next life they would be a real husband and wife. This display of fresh pity directly made the long-haired bandit mad, and he swung his blade intending to sever their love. Suddenly, Father Duong appeared in time. With one move, he broke the dark spell, leaving the bandit and his subordinate stunned. What magical artifact is this old man using? The subordinate wanted to rush up to show off but was easily dealt with by a strike from Father Duong. The protective shield shattered. The long-haired bandit was terrified and was dragged away by his cohorts, running away in a sorry state. At the same time, Kage was staring at the peerless treasure in Father Duong's hand, drooling with desire. It turned out this was a supreme technique rarely seen in 1,000 years. Father Duong, having used up all his vital energy to save his daughter, declared on the spot that he wanted to find a successor. As a result, he only chose one of the two. Between Duong and Atirat, Kage, you were completely ignored, jealous to the point your face twisted. Serving this old man for decades, yet in the end getting absolutely nothing. He secretly put poison in the water and pretended to care. Master, drink some water. The poisoned water went down his throat, and Father Duong suddenly fell ill. Duong still thought her father had just exhausted his power, not knowing that the person she trusted most was harboring a sinister blow. The next day, Atirat had just appeared when he was arrested. The prince directly affirmed that he was the traitor. The weapon transport route was top secret. Only you knew. Yet the guns fell into the hands of the long-haired bandit. Atirat gritted his teeth and cried injustice. As a result, the long-haired bandit's subordinate had now been caught. Early this morning, he pinpointed the exact ammunition depot. It was Atirat who revealed the hiding place of the ammo. Witnesses and physical evidence were complete. The crime was clear. The prince ordered this traitor to be thrown into the dungeon. The news reached Isan's mother's ears. She forced Isan to cut ties with the traitor who committed treason. Assets and land are all confiscated. We might even be implicated if we aren't careful. Isan was so scared her face was drained of blood, and she immediately backed off. At the same time, the prince was interrogating him privately. It turned out all of this was a bitter meat trick arranged by the prince and Itirit, just to lure the real culprit into revealing himself. While they were talking, Duong suddenly rushed in, and Isan also followed close behind. Isan hurriedly spoke first, wishing she could immediately draw a clear line, fearing implication. When it was Duong's turn, she was indignant for Itirit. She pointed straight at the prince's face and scolded him for being a foolish ruler. He went through life and death for the country. If he isn't rewarded, fine, but he is even punished. Seeing the prince's face turn pale, Isan was terrified and turned around to flee. Duong scolded even more vigorously, eventually even kicking over the prince's table and dragging Itirit away. At the same time, the extreme poison in Father Duong began to take effect. His fingernails immediately turned black. Sawa and his son received the news that Itirit and Duong had been dealt with. The great vengeance was avenged. The two packed up gold and silver preparing to flee. Unexpectedly, Fing had been secretly watching them early on. Seeing them move, she immediately relayed the message. Just as they reached the city gate, they were detained. Itirit led the troops to surround them and caught them on the spot. In court, witness number 1 identified that it was Sawa who ordered him to monitor the movement of the batch of guns. Witness number 2 also declared that it was Sawa who threatened and used him to frame Itirit. The physical evidence was even more undeniable. Among the jewelry they carried, there was a ring belonging to a noble who met with a mishap 10 years ago. And the gold bars were even engraved with a mark. The chain of evidence was perfect. Sawa looked up at the sky and laughed like a madman, admitting he was the one who colluded with the long-haired bandit. Itirit has been dealt with. I'm satisfied, I confess. Just as he was gloating, Itirit walked in majestically from the door. Sawa was immediately stunned. He had fallen into a trap. The truth was brought to light. Itirit finally realized his true love and decided that when he went home, he would find Father Duong to ask for her hand in marriage. The happiness came too suddenly. How could Duong handle it? She was so agitated she fainted. When she opened her eyes, she was at the Kuan family home. Thinking the sweetness just now was only a dream, Itirit suddenly grabbed her hand, preparing to propose himself. Before the key words could be spoken, a servant crawled and stumbled in, screaming, "Your father is not well." He suddenly fell into a deep coma. The royal doctor couldn't find the illness, and the high monk said it wasn't an evil spirit. Duong cried like rain. Her father's breathing was faint at times and completely stopped at others. Duong's attendant recognized the symptoms. This was the sleeping worm poison, a unique poison from Kage's hometown. The poisoned person would be in a coma for 2 or 3 days and then pass away in their sleep. Everyone suddenly realized Kage had disappeared without a trace. They guessed that his love had turned into hate. Jealous that Itirit got the golden bell shield while he got nothing, he laid hands on Father Duong. Itirit swore he would definitely find Kage. He was the only one who knew about the sleeping worm poison, and only he knew how to cure it. Isan's mother received news again. It's over. Itirit not only wasn't punished but was about to be promoted. Isan collapsed on the spot, having bet on the wrong side once again. Late at night, in the quiet, Itirit blamed himself in front of the comatose Father Duong. He took all the blame on himself. It was all his fault. If not for me, Kage wouldn't have been jealous and hateful. You also wouldn't have been poisoned. He swore he would capture Kage to save Father Duong's life. After that, he would voluntarily withdraw and return Duong to Kage so everything could go back to how it was. Once again, Itirit decided to let go because of love. All these words were overheard by Duong's attendant, who was pretending to sleep. Kage was wanted throughout the city. The soldiers fired a signal, and Itirit immediately flew off to give chase, finally locking onto Kage's hiding place. Duong ran frantically to the scene. She had learned of Itirit's absurd decision from the attendant. My father gave you the holy item because he didn't approve of Kage's character. Kage's jealousy is because of his own greed. What right do you have to treat me like a gift to be transferred? Itirit was finally scolded into waking up. He realized he had to get the antidote to save his father-in-law and also hold on tight to his wife. To save the old father who was poisoned, Duong and Itirit cornered Kage. Unexpectedly, holding the antidote in his hand, he arrogantly threatened, "Let me go." While the two sides were in a standoff, Duong suddenly ran up and voluntarily offered herself as a hostage. With a hug, she cried and said, "It's all my father's fault." This chain of emotional plays made him completely stunned. Seeing that he was about to soften and hand over the antidote, Itirit had already circled behind to approach. Kage was shocked to realize he had fallen for a trick. Actually, the thing in his hand wasn't the antidote at all. It was just some incense ash he grabbed conveniently. Seeing he couldn't escape in a critical moment, he pulled out the stolen divine artifact. The bandits hiding in the shadows also saw the divine artifact in this brat's hand. who knew this useless guy was usually lazy. At the critical moment, he forgot the password completely, and the divine artifact immediately lost its effect, becoming scrap metal. With no way out, he could only use his life to threaten them. If you let me go, I will tell you the prescription. Itirit then proposed a life and death horse race in exchange for the prescription. Kage would ride a horse, and for every distance he ran, he would say one ingredient. By the time he reached the red gate, he had to say all 5 ingredients. If not, Itirit would shoot directly. As a result, just as he said the third ingredient, the ambushing bandits suddenly appeared. At the same time, soldiers ambushing around also jumped out. Kage was used as a meat shield and was instantly shot into a sieve. Finally, the divine artifact was also snatched away. In his dying moments, he suddenly had an epiphany. Realizing he had been wrong beyond redemption, Duong cried and demanded the last 2 ingredients, thinking Kage's conscience had awakened. Unexpectedly, listen carefully. If Master thinks Itirit is better than me, then let him save himself. It was unbelievable that this petty person, even at death's door, didn't forget to play mind games. He said 100 dying words but absolutely refused to reveal the prescription to save a person. In another development, Fing intercepted the bandits to settle new debts and old grudges all at once. Fing won an overwhelming victory and successfully snatched back the divine artifact. At the same time, Sawa and his son staged a bitter meat trick to break out of prison. The old man pretended to have a heart attack to lure the guards away. Sawa took the chance to attack from behind, got the keys and escaped successfully. At the royal palace, the crown prince was examining the divine artifact that Fing had risked her life to retrieve. This weapon had boundless power. Unfortunately, the only person who knew how to use it was currently on the border of life and death. Everyone decided to seal the divine artifact in the deep palace. Unexpectedly, the entire event was overheard by Sawa, who was hiding nearby without missing a word. Upon leaving, Itirit's actions were a bit strange. He performed a grand farewell ceremony to the crown prince, as if he were arranging his final affairs. Itirit had secretly ordered the elimination of Kage, completely cutting off Father Duong's hope of survival. Too devastated, Duong blamed Itirit entirely for her father's passing. I hate you. You are the one who harmed my father. She detested this city, didn't want to stay for even a minute, and just wanted to leave immediately. He had no more attachments and would live the rest of his life with this torment. In an instant, he wrote a suicide note in extreme remorse. Just out the door, Duong met Fing. It turned out the crown prince had long sensed Itirit's state was extremely abnormal, suspecting he wanted to end himself due to excessive guilt. This unbelievable speculation shocked Duong on the spot, but the assistant thought it was very likely because Father Duong's dying wish was that Kage must be eliminated. A person like him would definitely sell the divine artifact to the long-haired bandit. Once it fell into the hands of bad people, the whole country would drown in a sea of blood. Itirit and Father Duong shared the same belief, which was to resolve Kage. Perhaps initially, Itirit intended to wait for Kage to hand over the antidote before taking action, but unexpectedly the sudden appearance of the bandits disrupted his plan. Realizing the truth, Duong hurriedly returned to Itirit's house. She saw him holding a sharp sword, with a suicide note next to him on the table. In the next life, I will be your father's son again. She shouted to stop him. He didn't intend to end it but wanted to go fight a life-and-death battle with the long-haired bandit. This letter is just in case of any mishap. Leaving a little memorial for my father. You surely aren't resolving yourself, right? You care about me? Or have you fallen in love with me? Suddenly, a signal came from outside the window. The whole city was on alert. Turned out, the deputy officer had been ambushed by Sawa and his son, and the divine artifact was snatched away on the spot. The whole city was in critical danger. The divine artifact would very likely be sold by Sawa and his son to the long-haired bandit. Sure enough, the two traitors had already offered the divine artifact to him. His eyes lit up. The treasure he had always dreamed of had now come to his door. The password was just child's play to him. With a wave of his hand, the divine artifact instantly awakened, power surging like the tide, heaven and earth changing color. Cruel sounds echoing everywhere. A letter of war was sent down immediately. Open the city gates and surrender. I won't harm people, only taking the treasure. Otherwise, I will level the whole city. Real men cannot accept this insult. All three immediately reached a consensus to fight to the end. They urgently summoned the whole city, swearing to protect their homeland until the last breath. Anyone who wanted to flee could go right now, but all the people were willing to stay to protect their homes together. Only Isan and her mother panicked and fled. Fing also rushed day and night to the neighboring city to beg for reinforcements. Just then, a foreigner happened to come here for business. Hearing the news, he voluntarily offered support. On one side, Itirit had gathered all military forces, swearing to face the battle. On the other side, Fing also brought back hope. Not only did the neighboring city send troops for reinforcement, But the foreigner also brought advanced weapons. The battle was about to break out, and Duong suddenly appeared. She swore to live and die with Itirit. Now that her father had recovered, she had nothing left to worry about. It turned out the assistant made a mistake and used a medicinal herb with a similar name. Thanks to that, the old master made a miraculous recovery. Upon waking up, his perspective had become much broader. He advised his daughter to set aside personal feelings. Itirit is a man of great vision, the chosen one. Those who do great things don't sweat the small stuff, so what is sacrificing this little ego? Enlightened by her father, Duong regretted it endlessly. She hated herself for being so petty. Itirit's mission was higher than everything else. His heart held the whole world. Itirit was very touched that someone finally understood him, but deep down, he still wanted to protect Duong completely. He pretended to send her to support the foreigner, but in reality, it was to get her to a safe place 1,000 miles away. He didn't want her to walk into death with him. However, just as Duong successfully met the foreigner and got the new weapons, the long-haired bandits' army had approached the foot of the citadel. The divine artifact was in position. Heaven and earth changed color, and screams filled the sky. Hearing the roaring from afar, Duong realized she had fallen for Itirit's trick. Her heart burned with anxiety, fearing she wouldn't make it in time for the great battle. Suddenly, she saw a maid sneaking a buffalo away to flee, and an idea came to her. She could quickly return to the city now. At the same time, Father Duong also brought a magical treasure to counter the divine artifact. The final decisive battle was just waiting to erupt. Very quickly, the long-haired bandit appeared. The prince immediately used Father Duong's magical treasure to test his strength. But sure enough, the long-haired bandit's divine artifact was extremely powerful. At the same time, Itirit also rushed into a direct gunfight. After a fierce exchange, Itirit, fighting 1 against 2, was somewhat losing ground. Just as he was in danger, Duong appeared in time, counterattacking to save him from the perilous situation. Thanks to her help, the two quickly took down the enemy. Immediately after, Duong told her husband she had brought a surprise. Seeing the modern machine gun, Itirit couldn't help but smile. Seeing him staring at the amulet, she told him she was wearing it, hoping it could help him fight against the dark magic. Itirit was extremely touched. Over here, the prince, after a period of resistance, couldn't win against the long-haired bandit's divine artifact. The magical sword broke in two. While everyone was worried, the sound of Itirit's machine gun rang out rapidly. It saved the prince's life. The long-haired bandit was stunned by the new weapon, called it a devil gun, and then continued to open fire. First, the long-haired bandit tried to fight back, but the machine gun was truly too powerful. He hurriedly summoned the powerful divine artifact back, ordering it to deal with them. Unexpectedly, due to the immense power of the machine gun, plus the protection of the amulet, the divine artifact couldn't attack but backfired, turning around to attack its owner directly. Along with the rapid sound of gunfire, the long-haired bandit was finally destroyed. After dealing with the strongest enemy, the young couple finally breathed a sigh of relief. The soldiers under his command saw their master was gone. The whole squad was like a snake without a head, hurriedly fleeing. Sawa and his son saw their backer was lost. The old man planned to escape, but Sawa came up with a plan to grab Itirit's father as a hostage, demanding a boat to escape. But Itirit's father was not easily subdued. Seeing the deadlock, the old man urged his son to run. But it was too late. Sawa was subdued by the prince right on the spot. Finally, everything was resolved. After quelling this rebellion, the feelings between Itirit and Duong progressed another step. Itirit boldly confessed his love, speaking words from the bottom of his heart. The two exchanged a sweet and happy kiss. Just when they thought the storm had passed, disaster struck again. Isan and her mother were determined not to let the couple be happy. Today, after the prince inherited the throne from his father, he began appointing nobles. Just as Itirit's name was called out, Isan stepped forward to object, claiming he was not worthy. Next, she revealed the secret of Itirit and Duong's fake marriage, leaving everyone stunned. The prince immediately questioned the two, scolded them severely, and declared he would handle it fairly and squarely tomorrow. After the two left, Fing spoke up, saying he was too cruel, but unexpectedly, she got scolded by him too. On this side, the fake couple returned home in a worried mood. Even so, he still took all the blame on himself. Duong sadly went outside to think, when suddenly a shadow pulled her into a small house. The people inside turned out to be the prince and Fing. Actually, the prince was just pretending to be strict to find a way to help his friend. That night, the fake couple lay on the bed confiding in each other. Duong said she would ask her father about a time reversal spell. Maybe it could turn the situation around. Unexpectedly, Itirit said that even if time turned back, he wouldn't want to change anything, because he didn't want to return to the past, the time when he hadn't loved her yet. These words made Duong extremely touched. That night, the two finally truly belonged to each other. The next morning, what had to happen happened. Itirit intended to speak up and accept all the blame, but the prince forbade him, saying he could only answer the questions asked. The first question the prince asked was whether Itirit and Duong had officially lived together as husband and wife yet. This question made everyone present feel embarrassed for them, but a bigger surprise was yet to come. After hearing the affirmative answer, the prince brought in the person he had sent to investigate at Itirit's house that morning. The sergeant reported that he inspected Itirit's bed and found evidence that the two were truly husband and wife last night. Everyone started whispering and gossiping again. The prince chimed in with a comment about the level of intimacy, making the couple blush beet red, especially when hearing the reported number. To top it off, the sergeant even exposed the collected physical evidence in front of the public. Even so, Isan still didn't give up. She stepped forward to question them, claiming they knew the outcome beforehand so they did it on purpose last night. Hearing this, the prince invited Itirit's two servants in. With the prince's permission, they went on and on about the couple's daily life together in front of everyone, finally adding a detail that left the schemer speechless. Faced with such clear evidence, the prince announced they were a real married couple and were innocent. The couple burst with happiness at this moment. Just as the two were about to go home, Isan stopped them. Her role had to come to an end. Isan apologized to them for everything, then said goodbye because she was about to move to another place to live. Seeing that Isan had repented, the couple forgave her. They even hugged goodbye sincerely. Duong also wished Isan would find her true love soon. Sure enough, the wish worked immediately. Right after that, her mother introduced her to a new match. Upon meeting, the two had feelings for each other at first sight. On this side, the prince also expressed his feelings to Fing, saying he wanted to take her as his wife. Fing burst with happiness. Finally, the main couple, after so many obstacles, from misunderstandings to a fake marriage. After so many conflicts during their time together, they finally resolved all misunderstandings, listening to the reasoning of their hearts to become one. The movie ends here. Thank you all for patiently waiting and watching until the very last moment. I wish you all find your true love at the end of every road. Bye-bye.